Okay, so today we have a very, very special guest. It is Mr. Stephen Fair. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm very well. I'm good, thank you, Nick. Yep, and you?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thank you. And today I'm going to ask you a few questions. And I know that it's very special for you in these recent times. It's the 50-year anniversary of you in business, and it's absolutely amazing to see that. And thank you for being so supportive. We met over Twitter, as I've met quite a lot of inspirational people over Twitter, just like you. And my mum and my family tell me of all of the work that you do, and it's so shocking. It's absolutely amazing. So let's start with the questions. So
Yeah, of course.
just to start it off, could you tell us a bit about your journey in your own words?
Yeah, well, I came from a difficult background. My family didn't have any money. We lived on a council estate. My parents were divorced, and I was brought up between my mother's place, which was in Wiltshire, and my dad, who lived in Bristol. So it was a difficult upbringing. We never had anything to speak of, and so there you are. And then when I was when I was 14, nearly 15, I came up with the idea for my first business. And the people that had the patent for that were based in the United States. So I needed to contact them in those days, which this is over 50 years ago.
Wow.
So in those days, of course, no internet, no mobile telephones like you guys have. So the only answer I had was, and we'd never had a telephone in the house or in the flat. I'd never used a telephone. I know it sounds strange today to people, but in those days it wasn't as strange as that. And I went to the phone box on the council estate where my dad lived, and had a go at ringing the people in America. So to cut a long story short, I got through. Eventually I managed, after many months, to persuade them to give me the agency for the United Kingdom for the cleaning product that they had. And I then went about selling it, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you started from such a young age. And I suppose you've kind of grown from the age of 14 and you've developed over the years, haven't you?
Well, I think we all do,
Yeah.
we all do, you start somewhere. It's not where you start, it's where
Yeah.
you're going. That's what counts. And,
Yeah.
so that's what I did.
Yeah, you have to look positively to the future. And that's exactly what you did. And I
Yeah.
can't even imagine at my age doing what you did. And it must have been 100% more difficult back then without the technology that we have today as well.
Well, yeah, I sorry to interrupt you, Nick. Yeah, I think that's the problem. I mean, the problem then was, for me, I had to go to a coin box and put coins in a phone box to get through to America. Well, of course, they just ate the coins. I mean, America was in those days, people didn't track. This would have been around about 1968. So people didn't travel to America then. Ordinary people didn't travel, but even well-to-do people, very few people traveled back and forth across the Atlantic. Maybe one or two. I mean, traveling to Spain never really started to the 70s.
Yeah.
So this was way before then,
Yeah, I know. And you were kind of dreaming big at the time. And I suppose that's what you have to do. You have to aim high, and you have to really try and aim high. And that's exactly what you've done. You've made such an impact at such a young age, and it must be so hard. I can't even imagine it. So yeah, it's so interesting to see that.
Well, I think the important thing is to remember that it is all out there to be
Yeah,
done.
definitely.
And I mean, I always think today, with people say about young people like you, but the important thing is that you are the future of our world. People your age are the future. So people of my age need to, if anything, help you and maybe give you some when you've had a life my life's been very varied. I've been all over the world. I've done business all over the world, and in the UK, I do lots of different things. And so I suppose I can pass on that experience
Yeah.
for you guys to interpret it in the way you feel fit.
Yeah.
Not necessarily doing but the way you feel, that you should interpret it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a good thing. So I think, young people are going to be, young people are so, well, you are the most important, because you are the people that will actually drive everything forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we need the motivation that you had when you were younger. And speaking speaking of the future, this new decade, we thought it was going to be new and fresh, but sadly, it's gone off to a pretty horrible start. And the world is in a recession now, and it's due to coronavirus. And there are so many losses of lives and lockdown, and the economy has dropped massively. So, do you think that we will ever be able to recover, and from then on going back to what we used to have? Do you think that we could move on from this, or do you think that this virus has affected us for the rest of our lives?
I think that the simple answer from my perspective of the question is yes, I think we can recover. Yes, I think we will recover. And I believe that if we learn from the lessons of COVID, we can make the world a better place than it was before. So, your question would, do I think we can get back to where we were? I think we can surpass where we were.
Yeah.
I think we can make the world a better place. Enterprise is so important to prosperity wherever it is in the world.
Definitely.
But equally, enterprise creates prosperity, but that prosperity does need to be spread around a bit. We can't have 3/4 of the world starving whilst the rest eat more food than they need. So
Exactly.
we've got massive obesity because people just eating far too much, and yet in other parts of the world they can't eat anything at all. So we do need to level out that. We need to think about that within our own society in the UK, but also globally. And enterprise can be a leader in that. Enterprise isn't against the people, it's for the people. And I think entrepreneurs today are beginning to recognize that. I certainly have always believed that. I've always believed that, in a way, I was chatting with someone that had won the lottery, strangely enough, and they'd won quite a lot of money on the lottery.
Yeah.
They never had any money before. And they asked me, really, the reason they asked me is they didn't know, they were scared. They suddenly had this big windfall. They were ordinary people, and they didn't really know where they were and what they should do with it. And, I said to them, the thing is that in life, we often get windfalls, different people. A windfall can merely be meeting somebody that you find is inspirational, or somebody that gives you advice. That can be more valuable than a lottery win. But it's about using it properly, trying to use that influence that, in that case, money, would give them. So you can, driving forward with anything, whether you're driving forward with enterprise, whether you're a doctor or a dentist or a surgeon, we do live in a bizarre world where a professional footballer can earn £300,000 a week, and a heart surgeon earns £300,000 a year. I mean, it is a bit bizarre, that's the strange thing. And sometimes I do worry, well, not worry, I sometimes wonder how the public see a businessman that has maybe and does employ thousands of people, but they don't like it if that person seems too successful, but they're quite happy to celebrate a footballer who hasn't created any jobs and isn't employing people, earning £300,000 a week. That's okay.
Yeah.
So I think we need to there's a balance and an adjustment, and we need to think things through.
We definitely have to find that balance. And going off what we were talking about and how the economy and how we will succeed in the future, obviously education is a massive part of that, because we have to focus on the future. And when you started off, you were very young, at the age of 14, 15, and education has come a long way from then. but there still is those issues. So, what changes do you feel need to be made for the education of these future generations?
Well, I think we need to learn from the COVID crisis. Eventually, we will get over this. It's going to leave devastation behind. There are going to be huge number of bankruptcies. There is going to be a lot of personal tragedy because it affects people's health, mental health, all sorts of things. So it won't be. We won't just come out of this cleanly, but we will come out. And when we do, we must remember what we've been through and build for the future. So where do I think we're going to go? I think enterprise has a very big. You won't be surprised to hear me say that, but I think enterprise plays a big part.
Yeah.
I think enterprise education plays a big part. People can be enterprising, working in the public sector, or enterprising, working in the private sector for someone else. You don't have to run your own business to be enterprising. So I think that's important. I also think it's important that we cut we cut homelessness and poverty.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely essential that we create a prosperous society and then feed some of it to the bottom end to stop the people that just are struggling. So I think that society has a number of issues to deal with, and those issues aren't just going to go away. But I do think we need balanced leadership. I'm not a person that believes in radical politics. I believe in balanced politics.
Yeah.
They're good and bad on all sides, and they call each other's names, and I just can't really get into that. So I'm not a person that supports any particular political party. I support an idealism, if you like, and that idealism is that we create a prosperous, enterprise-driven economy that supports those that can't support themselves.
Yeah.
That's what I believe in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I think that is definitely the way forward, because we have to look at all the different aspects, and we have to think if one thing improves, another will fall, and we have to find that middle ground, and we have to try and make it rise slowly together. And going on from what you said is an ideal society, and people getting more education, more jobs. Do you think that social media should be a massive impact, or do you think that people can go to the kind of like the older ways and do it face to face, or do you think that using online devices and social media should be in future generations and jobs?
Well, I think social media is here to stay. I mean, all our online devices are here to stay. It's as easy to have a really good meeting like we're having today, or a meeting with a president of a country, or a prime minister of a country, sat in your living room, as it is traveling thousands of miles for a 1 hour meeting. So, because we have to remember, when we do that, we are burning carbon footprint. We're increasing the carbon footprint,
Yeah.
We're burning fossil fuels and all the other things that go with it. So we don't always need those short business trips. This makes it much easier.
Exactly.
I will just say something about social media. I'm concerned about social media. And the reason I'm concerned about it is because traditional newspapers and traditional media have editors. That means that if someone thinks of something, there is a gap between when they've thought of it and when it gets published. In other words, when it's promoted to millions of people. And the problem with social media is you or I can think of something now, and 20 seconds later it can be out to the world. Well, of course, if you or I were President Xi of China, or Donald Trump in the US, or whoever takes over after Donald Trump, whatever, those things can be put straight online. And the problem is they may not have been thought through properly. They might just be an off-the-cuff thing. So whereas with a newspaper or traditional media, that goes through an editing process where people look at whether what's being said is the truth. So social media has this sort of ability to deliver lies just as
Yeah,
much as it has the ability to deliver the truth.
definitely.
So it's that sort of that's what worries me with social media. You know, someone goes and criticizes
They can
someone.
take it out of context.
Yeah, they take it out of context, and I think that's a real issue, and it's something that we as a society need to look at. Um, Eventually, if too many people on social media tell too many uh, lies, promote things that aren't true, people will just see it as not valid in the end, and it will become weakened because of it. So the strength of social media is that what's delivered is a thought through process. You know, there is a gap, not just fired off the cuff. So it's great on the one hand because people do sort of say what they feel, and that's a good thing, but it does leave people open to an awful lot of criticism that maybe sometimes don't deserve it, and some of them do deserve it.
Exactly. There's just as bad as there is good, and especially
Yeah,
what you said, people can just upload something, and with social media, it's very difficult to understand certain phrases, and you might take it out of context, or you might not know enough about it. Whereas in real life, as you said, when something going into the press, they will think over, explain it to the public. So there's
yeah.
definitely there were the pros and the cons of social media. But in my personal opinion, I think that if we have it, we should utilize it and try and improve it for the future as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, I write a column, as you may know, for the Bristol Post and other newspapers, but it goes through an editing process. So quite often they're pretty good because I'm quite careful. I do in my own internal editing when I write anything,
Mm.
and I try to be balanced and reasonable about the argument that I make. I mean, that's a matter of opinion, but I do for myself try to be. But when it gets to the newspaper, of course, a professional newspaper like the Bristol Post or any of the other newspapers out there, there is an editing process where they go through and check what's being said. And they don't allow bad language. I have to be honest, I don't like the use of really bad language on social media. It's too easy. I
Yeah.
don't see why it's necessary. To some of the things that come out on social media, I don't feel that it adds anything to the argument. Anyone putting an argument forward using really bad language, in my opinion, it's merely detracting from their point of view.
Yeah.
People sort of discount it
Yeah,
as
they can't think of anything else to say, so
that's what it is, yeah. And so
yeah,
they come
exactly.
out with that, and that's
Yeah.
it's a shame. Yeah,
It is a true shame as well. And I kind of want to bring up in your area of expertise, obviously you've had a very successful career, and with everything going on in the economy now, and the furlough agreement is now coming to a sort of halt. You have kept on all of your staff as well, and I definitely, you deserve a commendation for that because that's absolutely amazing. But also the prices of houses have gone up and down within this crisis. So if there were someone out there to wanting to buy a house, what are your advice for those people who want to seek and purchase property?
yeah, it's an interesting one, Nick. I think at the moment prices and the market is holding up well in the UK.
Hmm.
Housing market.
Yeah,
But the reason it's holding up, in my view, is because there are a lot of people changing their lifestyles. Um, Maybe some want houses in places with outside space because they see what's happened. So there's various people moving, but there's also people moving into apartments with no outside space because that's what suits them. So I think the market at the moment is holding up well for various reasons, primarily because there was a shortage and there remains a shortage of certain property. There's been and remains a distinct shortage of affordable housing, as an example. But buying property, people also struggle to find the right house or the right apartment because of that we haven't been building enough homes for the last 20 years.
yeah,
I hear these arguments, and I get this across the political parties because I've got friends in all the political parties, You know, I say this right across the board. None of the political parties have ever built enough houses, ever. Not really, to satisfy the need. We should really be able, in this society, an advanced democracy such as the UK, be able to build enough houses so that no one is short of a roof over their head.
Exactly.
But we don't, and we haven't been, and that's been across the board. It's been the fault of all of the parties, including coalition government, everybody. So we need to get our heads together and make sure we build enough. We do need to understand in society, I think, that everyone can't afford a house to own. But if we want a stable and thinking society going forward, people need roots. They need to be able to put down roots. So the problem with the Short Hold Tenancy Act, which gives someone a 12-month, 6-month, 12-month contract, that's great because it does mean that you've got mobility of people can move and they can get their house back. I mean, you know, if you had a house and you were moving to trying for a job in London, you might want to rent your house in Weston-super-Mare out, but you won't do that unless you're sure that if your job in London doesn't work out, you can get your house back. Otherwise, you'll just lock it up and leave it. And that isn't any good for anyone. So the Short Hold Tenancy Act does have a place, but we haven't built enough affordable housing on what's known as a regulated tenancy. And for those people that are watching this interview, regulated tenancy means that effectively the house or apartment may be owned by a housing association, the council, or whoever, but you, as the tenant, have a right to occupy it for life. You also have a right to be able to, usually, to have a dog. You have a right to be able to paint your door, what colour. Mostly, you didn't used to. Council houses would insist on a certain colour. When I was a boy in Bristol, it was either green or blue. I can't remember the years now. But everyone, they were stigmatised because if you had a house like that, they knew it was a council house. And so they felt there was sort of a two-tier system. We need to get away from that. So regulated tenancies, in a way, it doesn't matter who owns the house, as long as you have security of tenure. So as long as you or the individual can pay the rent, they are able to live in that house as if they owned it. Now, for me, what that does, that creates stability within our society because families can put down roots. It's very difficult to put down roots when in 9 months' time or a year's time, you've got to move somewhere because your tenancy's up. So these short holds, they do work in certain instances, but not in all instances. So we need to build more affordable housing so that the people that can't afford to own their own house can at least afford to live in their own house, as if it was their own house, for as long as they are there. So I think that's important. But my advice to anyone thinking of buying now would be, I think I always think there's no time like the present in most things. So, but I think next year, I think it's going to be difficult for the housing market a year from now, and maybe the year after that, and the year after that. It's bound to be more difficult, in my opinion, for the simple reason: bankruptcies, failures, companies, redundancies, unemployment, lack of the government has borrowed billions of pounds that needs paying back, so we're going to be strangled by a massive global debt. So we're not the only country, incidentally. I've got friends of mine in France, friends in Germany feeling exactly the same. So this isn't a UK only phenomenon. It will be the same in the US. So the answer to your question is I wouldn't not buy now if the person is able to get a mortgage, or they've got probably most people don't have the cash, they need a mortgage. If they can get a mortgage, I'd still go ahead and buy. But bear in mind that end of next year, we may see a bit of a slump, and it may take a few years to come out of it. But if you're buying a house, if I was buying a house with a view to selling it at the end of next year, I wouldn't buy it now. If I was buying a house to live in it for the next 10 years, I'd buy it now. because eventually it'll come back and it won't matter to you. And you'd have had those 10 years of enjoyment living in your own home. So I wouldn't not buy if I was, but buying and thinking, but I might sell next year, I don't see house prices going up.
Yeah.
I can't see it, even with the shortage.
Yeah, because people are losing their jobs, and also there's that demand for houses. People are moving all of the time, and when you can't,
Yeah.
people are normally very picky when it comes to their house, because
Yeah.
unless you work within that profession of buying and selling houses, people want to buy that house and stay in it. So you're obviously going to be picky about the one that you choose. And as you said, there's not wide enough range that are affordable in your price, and obviously getting a mortgage is the smartest option to do. And I think there are definitely more laws put into place now than there has been before. And I think it's definitely in favor of the person buying the house. And yeah, so yeah, 100% what you said. And thank you so much for the advice of the people. So thank you for that. And on to my next question. So everyone is trying to resume to their normal life, but they're saying that there is a second wave coming out. I personally don't think it's a second wave. I think it's a continuation of the first wave. It was never gone, so I don't think we should call it a second wave because it's always been there. We've just ignored it for so amount of time. So, and it's affecting every country, as you said. You have friends in France and Germany. It's affecting everyone. And what do you think is different in how our community is coming together from when you were a child and when is it now? So, how do you think that communities have changed, if you understand?
Oh, yeah, that's a big question. I think essentially, people are the same, in as much as we all want to have food, we all want shelter, we all want to succeed in life, we all want to better ourselves. Well, not all, but most people want a better life than they've currently got. I mean, they want maybe a different car, or they want a car if they haven't got one. They want to go to good schools, they want education, they want all these things. But that was always the case, really, deep down. But society has changed quite a lot. We now have a much more multicultural society,
Yeah.
not just in the UK, but in the US, everywhere, in Germany, everywhere. Places like Russia are still quite insular in the population that has been fairly static. They don't tend to, and the same thing with China, they don't tend to have changed their demographics as much as maybe we have in the liberal West, where we've accepted people of other cultures and religions. I mean, my own personal belief is that I don't see why any of it should make any difference. I've got friends of mine in just about every religion. I've got friends that are Orthodox Christians, I've got friends that are Jews, and I've got friends that are Muslims. So I don't sort of think to myself one or the other, really. I mean, as long as they're not radical, as long as they are reasonable. I don't. Same thing in politics. So I think it's all about being reasonable. So I think society has changed in as much as people. The television's changed a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
It has changed a lot because imagery is a very powerful driver for mental stimulation. We read books, but if we watch a film, or you watch David Attenborough for an hour, you learn more from that probably than you did reading the book. It just stays in people's head. So yeah. I think I think television has changed it. When I was when I was 5 or 10, very few people really had televisions. They had them in America, but the rest of the world, not very many. So the power to influence by television is massive. And I don't think that always has been managed very well.
Yeah.
So we're sending out images that are affecting people,
Yeah, I suppose going on what you've said before and now, I think whatever's in popular demand, more money's invested in. So obviously, I assume from when you were a child, football, there wasn't really the millions and billions of pounds invested in it as there are today. But I assume that as more people get into it and it's becoming more popular, they'll invest more money into it. And that's exactly what's happened with television. And I suppose they're trying to provide wide range of things to show people, and it's just becoming a bit too much now, if you understand.
24/7,
Yeah,
365. It's, we've got everything. We've got I mean, I never watch a television program unless I watch it on iPlayer or on one of the catch-ups, because I'm never anywhere long enough. I'm doing things, I'm working, and television programs on. Usually, now and again not. Now and again I manage to sit down with a glass of wine and I'm watching the television at that moment, But more often than not, I've got to get it on catch-up of one type or
yeah,
another. But of course, all that is available now. So I think, the television has a massive power and to influence, and therefore has a huge responsibility to the
yeah,
society it's broadcasting to,
yeah,
and radio also. I mean, radio as well. I tend to think in many ways that it's the visual thing with the television. I think
mhm,
that's what it is. So I think that was different in my day when I was your age. There wasn't the volume of television that there is today. I mean, usually the television midnight it was off. Usually before midnight, 11 o'clock quite often the television would fit, and it would finish, and it wouldn't actually start until 4 in the afternoon. There was no daytime television, so you'd be lucky to get a television program if you put the television on at 4 o'clock. If I was in school and I came in and put the television on at 3:45, there wouldn't be anything on. All you have would be a screen saying BBC or ITV. And then at maybe 4:30 or something, that program that started the night would come on, and the programs would run through to maybe 11 or sometimes 12. And then somebody would come on and say good night, and the television would be, and that was right up until well into the 60s and early 70s. And then we had this massive explosion of television that we have now. And of course, the internet's, watch it anywhere you like. You can't watch the BBC, of course, if you're in Cyprus or
yeah.
in where my sister lives. You can't watch the BBC on iPlayer because they don't have, because of the licensing arrangement. You can watch
Mhm.
ITV,
Yeah,
but
and I also assume that people listen. They really they believe everything that they see on TV as well. So
yeah,
if they're like it becomes an everyday thing, especially now. Everyone in the UK or everyone in the world turns on the television. They listen to it. They maybe do it before they go to work or after they come home, and they listen to what's on the news, and that might not be true, and they're listening to false information as well. So it's
yeah.
become, yeah, a massive part of people's lives. So yeah, and on to my second part. So thank you so much for asking all of the questions that might be asked. But I want to talk a bit more about you. So what moment or what motivated you in life to push you where you are today?
Well, I think for me, it was never about money. Actually, people always think that if you want to be successful, it was about money in the sense that I realised very early on that without money, there wasn't much you could do.
Hmm.
I'm afraid, you know, you have to have it. You can't do much if you haven't got it. If you want to go to London today and you haven't got the train fare or the petrol or whatever diesel for the car, you can't go. So we all need money, but for me, it was more an interest in the projects that I was involved in. So I was always interested in things, interested in acquiring knowledge, interested in understanding how things worked, including society. So it was always a bit more about the actual interest in the project itself. And that's why I've been involved in so many things, I think, over the years, because, I might be chatting with someone and someone would mention to me about, or I would spot something, a gap in the market, and think, oh, I know, that's what I'll go and have a look into that. And then I would use the libraries, the public libraries, and I would go to the library, because I always believed there was a book written on every subject. And so if I wanted to find out about something, whatever that might be, it could be something as obscure as dog training, or it could be something like nuclear fusion or something, whatever it was, I would go and get a book from the library on that subject and read up on that subject until I had what I found. And then if that project seemed like it had legs, if it seemed like it was potential for the future, then what I would do, I'd go and get another book and another book on that subject until I had read 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 books on that subject. And so it had gone from being a novice to being a bit more of an expert in that given field.
And I suppose
so
it's
that's how I
easier now. With technology, you can just type it up and you can get an article about it, and I think it's become a bit easier now. Yeah.
Oh, much easier. Yeah, much easier. And of course, if you want a book on it, as I do, when I want a book, I now have Audible, I have Kindle, I have all the. So if I want it, I just download it, and a couple of quid later, there it is, and I'm reading it. So I don't need to go. And that's one of the issues, you know. But I think it's very important to acquire knowledge. I mean, my advice to anyone, young people particularly, but anyone, is, you know, you can go into anything just because you are an expert or you have an interest in one area. You can move into another, but to move into that other, you need to gain knowledge. And my advice would be, go and swat up before you start spending any money. So if we're going into a new business, I read up on it. It's why I started the research facility that we have, which I started 37 years ago now. And originally it was based in Wales, and now it's based primarily in the Cotswolds and in Connecticut and the States. And we have a research facility that searches hotspots, investment hotspots, what we think will be the next big thing, so that we can look into it and see whether that will work, you know. And so we're researching all the time. Our business is actually not a property development business, really. Our business is built and founded on research. Our research facility gives us the ability to research deeply what we're going to look at. So we try to understand the market, whatever it might be. You know, if we're going to move into mining, as an example, we'll investigate every aspect of that before we actually move the chess piece, as it were, metaphorically.
Yeah, so going off that and about trying to find like the gaps in the market, or especially around the work that you do, what do you think was the biggest challenge that you've had to face in your life, whether it be work, or what was the biggest challenge that you had to face?
Biggest challenge? I think the biggest challenge was growing up in the circumstances that I grew up in. I didn't know anyone until I was 17 that had a bank account. None of my family ever had a bank account until I was 17. I'd never met anyone with a bank account. So I didn't understand anything about finance. I didn't understand anything about how any of it worked. So the biggest challenge for me was to understand that a bit more. And in fact, what I did, when I was 15, 16, I had a cleaning business, and that also incorporated all lots of other things. Well, that's why, you know, eventually moving into property development and stuff. And there was a banker. Sometimes I was interviewed a few years ago by Simon Jack, who's the I forget which channel he's on now, but he was BBC Today programme journalist. And Simon asked me about you know, how I started, and I reputedly met this rich banker. Well, there was no rich banker. I used to do, we had gardening, we would do gardening and landscape gardening as well as part of my overall business. And I had used to deliver newspapers sometimes as well. And there was a banker that lived in Westbury-on-Trym, and he actually worked for Lloyds Bank. He wasn't even the manager of Lloyds Bank. in Westbury-on-Trim, and I did his garden, and I said he wanted a goldfish pond, nothing as posh as a koi carp pond, although they are a member of the koi family, I think, goldfish, but a goldfish pond. And I said I would build it. And I said to him, I'll tell you what, if I build that pond for you free, you give me 2 hours every Saturday morning and tell me about finance. You give me 2 hours of lessons about finance and how it works. Because although he wasn't this great super duper investment banker that some people thought that I knew, which I didn't, he was just an ordinary guy working in a bank, but he did know an awful lot more than a 16-year-old kid. And so I used my ability to build his goldfish pond as a trade, because he wouldn't have wanted to be paid for it. And he did, and I didn't used to spend 2 hours, I'd often spend 4 or 5 hours. And I ended up sort of making the garden look like something out of Kew Gardens, because I kept it going so I could get more and more knowledge. So that was the foundation of how I learned about trade. He was no expert. I mean, he lived in that's what it was just more expert than me.
Yeah, you have to learn from somewhere. You have to start from somewhere, and I suppose.
Yeah, I need to start.
Yeah.
And I needed to open, at that time, I needed to open a bank account, and because I had a post office savings account, and any money I earned from the businesses I had when I was 14, 15, 16 were put into the post office savings account. And it wasn't until I went one day to put some more money in that the people in the savings account, the post office, told me I couldn't deposit the money. And I said, why not? And they said, because you've got too much in there. And there was a limit in those days as to what you could put in a post office trading account. So I had a check. I was only a kid. I had a check, and I thought, well, what do I do with this check? And the lady behind the counter said, you'll need to open a bank account. And I said, how do I do that? And she said, oh, you'll just have to go and see the bank. So I did go and see the bank, and it was a bank in Westbury-on-Trim in Bristol. And I went into the bank, said I'd like to open an account. And the girl there said, oh, right, okay, how old are you? And I was not quite 17, I was 16. And she said, you'll need your parents to sign a document you can't sign at 16. So I couldn't sign to have a bank. I need my father or someone. Well, my dad didn't have a bank account, nor my mum. Nobody had a bank account. I didn't know anybody in my family with a bank account. So in the end, I did manage to get someone, and I did open a bank account. But I had to have a guarantor to do that. Even though I wasn't borrowing any money, I was depositing it. So that just goes to show you how things have changed. Now banks fight for your business, and and all that sort of thing. In those days, it wasn't so much about identity. It was you needed to be of a certain age, and so that's a difference. I didn't know any of that.
I suppose it's become much more better now, and I suppose we've learned from our past generation, and we've tried to develop that into the future. And thank you so much for answering that question. It's quite interesting to see it from different points of views. And as we know that the world is suffering from a lot of problems, and we're trying to find all these solutions to these. But what do you reckon? What do you think the biggest problem the world is facing at the moment?
Well, one of the things that I worry about, it concerns me, is that we have a world at the moment that is polarized, and it's polarizing more, right, left, politically. And the worry I have is that we have, I think it's 8 nations now, but I may be wrong on that. I can't quite remember, that are nuclear powers. So we have a huge amount of nuclear weapons in the world still. And some of these weapons are massively powerful and can bring devastation to every corner of the world.
Exactly.
And wouldn't need very many of them. This idea that someone says, oh, well, the thing is, Britain's a waste of time them having nuclear weapons and all that. If you think about it, it isn't, because of course, Russia or China may be much more powerful, but nonetheless, if we were to hit them with nuclear missiles, their populations would be devastated by fallout and everything, same as ours.
Definitely.
So it doesn't matter whether you're a big country or a small country. If you have nuclear weapons, you're a powerful country. So
Yeah.
this isn't me making a sort of a sort of a broadcast about how good they are. It's a broadcast of how bad they are.
Exactly.
And the same thing with biological. COVID, you know, there's a school of thought. There are conspiracy theories. Where did it come from? Why did it get out? Was it deliberate? Was it an accident? But that accident was ignored and allowed to get out. We don't know. No one knows, and I'm not accusing anyone. But nonetheless, COVID has proved that a biological weapon would bring the world to its knees very, very quickly. So if these weapons, that's what worries me. So I am worried about that. Now, the antidote to that would be no one having biological weapons anywhere and no one having nuclear warheads anywhere.
Yeah.
How do you get that agreement?
Exactly.
How do you persuade leaders all over the world to do that? So I don't think that's going to be very possible very soon. And I think that's the biggest problem that we face as a society and as a human race.
Exactly. Especially the only time a nuclear warhead was ever used was in the Second World War as a way to silence Japan, because they saw it as less losses for them, and it has never been used up from then. But from the Second World War, the different countries around the world just started making these nuclear bombs, and I suppose it's kind of like a threat, because we're not going to use them, but we just have them for that sense of we're better than you. And it is scary to think that if one of these countries sends off a nuclear bomb, that could start a whole new problem for the world, and it could eventually end the world. And it is horrible
Of
to think
course
about.
of course the problem that we have is that a rogue state could get hold of them, and that's why you'll see from my Twitter social media feed, I am a huge supporter of democracies. I'm against dictatorships of any type, because I feel that and I don't mean this as any disrespect to anyone at all, but if you look at some of the protests that go on in the liberal West, try doing that under dictatorships. Go take some of those protests into the center of Beijing and start smashing up the shops and pushing things into rivers, and the response would not be as it's been in the West. There'd be a lot of people in prisons in the interior, and they'd be there for a very long time. So that's my problem with dictatorships of any type, and I'm talking about dictatorships of the far left and the far right. Any dictatorship, it needs to be a democracy. So that there are worries about the world. For me, I do think that, and I think biological warfare is more likely than nuclear warfare. But I don't think nuclear warfare is impossible, for the simple reason that they exist. The British Prime Minister, Conservative Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher said once, going back whenever she was in power, which was a fact, I think. And she said the problem with nuclear weapons isn't who's got them, it's the fact that they exist at all. That's the problem with nuclear weapons, that they exist. That we discovered that technology, and basically it's not going to go away. And so we have that. And now how do we manage it? Yeah. That's the problem. So whether someone likes Margaret Thatcher, doesn't like Margaret Thatcher, so I'm sure she's liked and disliked in equal proportions. Probably a lot that don't like. I'm not talking about whether you like her, but she did say that. And I think it was true. That's the evil of nuclear weapons. The evil of biological weapons is that we have the ability to. So I'm not. That concerns me far more than other things in society, because I think lots of other things, housing, we can build more houses. It's just the political will to do it.
Yeah.
We can, put more money into medicine. We can do that. Eventually we will have the cures for a lot of the ills of today, the cancers and things. We will. But this thing about nuclear weapons and biological weapons, that's more of a worry.
Yeah, it's the scary at the fact that one day a rogue state, or it's scary. And exactly what you said, it's not the problem that some countries, if there is a rogue state, it's that they exist at all, that we ever had to think of these ideas, and that we ever had to resort to that. Personally, I don't think that nuclear weapons should have ever been used, even in World War II, as many innocent people resulted to that, and it was horrible. So yeah, I definitely think that that is one of the biggest issues the world is facing. So I think now a bit more on the positive side of the question. So with lockdown and everything that's happened, were there any hobbies that you did? Was there any hobbies that you brought up or that you tried to do?
Well, I've carried on working. I mean, I've carried on working, just maybe online, or you still carry on. Business still carries on. I have gone out. I haven't travelled since March abroad, which is very unusual for me. I'm normally always travelling. I've been more UK based, but in that UK base, I've travelled. I go in my car, which is thankful, because I can socially, I can isolate. No one else has been in my car since March, other than my dog, but no person's been in the car. And so I don't, I've still gone about my business. Telephones, we've got social media, we've got the internet, but I read a huge amount. I do a lot of research, done some dog training and things like that to relax, but generally speaking, I carried on as I've always done, just differently. I mean,
Yeah, so 100%. And I suppose that's all we can do. We can carry on with the work that we've done. And we've been speaking for almost an hour now, and it's been absolutely amazing speaking to you. I know time is precious, especially for you, because you're a very busy person. So I don't want to keep you on for too long. I would like to thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. So before we end up this interview, was there anything else that you would like to add, or do you think we've touched upon everything?
Sorry, do I?
Is there anything that you would like to add? Charities that you would like to mention, or anything?
Yeah, I have a great respect for Lucy Air Ambulance in London, and also for Jessie May in Bristol. The Jessie May charity in Bristol, they just do some fantastic work, and I would encourage anyone to have a look at their website. Jessie May is JESSIE May MAY.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description.
.org. That would be great. They're just a great, and they're always short of money. They're always trying to raise money, and they do a great job for children, because they look after and they help children that are born with a terminal illness. So the kids all die. Most of them die before they're 18, and it's very, very sad. So, but they're a very uplifting charity, because the people, they make sure the kids have as good a life and the parents as they can get. So whilst they're here, so they live a full time. So, Jessie May's a good charity, Lucy Air Ambulance. And I also think that there are some other charities like The Big Issue, Emmaus, the homeless charity in Bristol. I was patron of Emmaus for quite some time, but I just can't do it all. They do a great job at getting homeless people back from the brink and back into society and useful members of society.
Amazing.
So there are 4 charities for people to look at. All of them excellent.
Yeah, we'll definitely put them in the description for everyone to
Thank you.
check out and to see. And thank you so much for your time. Honestly, I
No
can't
problem.
thank you enough. It's been absolutely amazing hearing from you, answering some of the questions that have been on most of our minds as well. So I wish you best of luck for the future. We will keep in touch as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, have a lovely day.